Hello there. Evening. Uh, so I was going to give my take on the Florida Panthers defeating the Edmonton Oilers a little over a week ago. Some people are still partying about that. I'm still really excited about it. However, there are things that I do have to say that I know there is a large demographic of hockey fans that do not agree with me. And not a one of them I've heard has come up with a reasonable rebuttal. Um, okay, just so we're clear, I wanted the Florida Panthers to win. Uh, I mean, in my earlier years when I was a child and I watched the NHL, I liked the Panthers because they had a panther on their jersey. I like cats. It was that simple. And then later on, it turned into, well, a lot of notable Vancouver Canucks have been traded to Florida where they essentially retire. Uh, Maybe not exactly there, but it really seemed like a good trading relationship that we had with the Florida Panthers. Uh, it's now that I would argue that they are definitely a dynasty team. The modern day one, to be more accurate about it, because well, things ain't like they used to be, and there's some things about the way they used to be that are not actually very good, especially for the sport and expansion. Which brings me to my point about bringing up something that hockey fans don't want to hear. They got something in their brain that tells them to be stupid, and they go along with that. Uh, that is, the Edmonton Oilers were told to take a dive. I am convinced of this, of what I saw, and the backstory behind it. Being a Canadian team, mostly Canadian players, the Edmonton Oilers should have had the more of an impact on Canadian society than has been played out in this last week. Um, Canadian media would like to sweep the Stanley Cups under the rug because the Canadian team did not win yet again this year. Um, the Florida Panthers were a better team, still are a better team, and will probably be a better team in the future. Will they make it to the Stanley Cup Finals again for the fourth time in a row? Doesn't seem very likely, but it is entirely possible. But Edmonton had regressed. They weren't as good as they were last year. They didn't have as much of a chance to beat Florida this year. And it really doesn't look like they're going to make a third appearance in the Stanley Cup final. Um, but what people don't want to believe about hockey is it is a giant capitalist corporation, and it wants to make more money, and it wants to expand. There aren't that many places in Canada where it can expand to at this point in time. Very few. There's a lot of hockey communities, but can they support a National Hockey League team? Absolutely not. There's a reason the Quebec Nordiques don't play there anymore, and it's simple numbers. They're not generating enough revenue for the NHL. Whereas in the States, there are still plenty of big cities left that can hold and house a National Hockey League team. And it's important to expand the game into the U.S. And that means traditionally not so much of a hockey community. Florida, it's a sports community, don't get me wrong, but it's taken time for, the Tampa Bay Lightning to really get in there and the Florida Panthers to really get in there so that there is a fan base. And typically when teams start winning, that's when fan bases kind of show up overnight. Um, Florida, Florida State, big place. Lots of people, lots of opportunities to make a lot of money for the NHL there. I mean, you don't have two NHL teams, three football teams, uh, two basketball teams, two baseball teams, a whole whack of soccer teams and other sports teams, um, and not be a juggernaut. Like Edmonton, they got the Oilers, who were known as the Edmonton Losers for the last 2 decades for sure. And you got the Edmonton Elk of the CFL. Now, the CFL is a pony compared to the stallion of the NFL. It simply is. You talk to anybody who watches American style football, and they'll tell you that the NFL is than it is. It is far wealthier. I don't watch too much football myself, but yeah, it's a bigger market. It makes more money. It's as simple as that. And, the Edmonton Oilers, they were making so many mistakes. They just were making very uncharacteristic mistakes. Connor McDavid's not injured. Leon Draisaitl's not injured, as far as we know. They played, and they didn't generate much offense. And they weren't very good defensively. And the thing is, it's not like... I mean, the Florida Panthers were on those guys. They were checking them. They were hard on the forecheck. But it wasn't the same as the 2007 Anaheim Ducks, if people remember. Samuel Paulson, Rob Niedermeyer, Travis Moen. That line, basically, if a team had an offensive line, bam, those guys shut them down so they couldn't get anything done. They did it to the Canucks. They did it to the Ottawa Senators. They just shut those guys down. Every time the top line went on, those guys showed up. There wasn't a specific line for that, for the Florida Panthers. Florida Panthers could generate offense. The fourth line didn't get much attention. They were only there for a few minutes and probably only there for the physical mentality. They didn't produce any offense, as far as I know. Although they got into some scrums and threw their weight around like a fourth line you would expect to do. But there wasn't a designated check-in line on McDavid or anything like that. They weren't hounding him, preventing him from doing things, and overall just stopping him. Now, the one goal that Connor McDavid did get was kind of a gimme. He was in the right place, right time. He had to score that goal. And, to me, it's things like this that make the game more interesting, which is something that a fair amount of people really don't like. They like the idea that the game is determined by, the 20-odd players per team, and it's done right then and there. They don't want to think of, it's like boxing. They're told to take a dive, they take a dive. Guess what? It is not that different. And, I've heard the dumbest arguments. I've heard people go, well, they're all getting paid millions of dollars and they all want to win the Stanley Cup. Yes. But if the boss's boss tells you to take a dive, you're taking a dive. And that is what happened with the Edmonton Oilers. I am convinced of this. I don't blame Stuart Skinner. A lot of people blame him, think he's the reason why they lost the Stanley Cup. That's not true. I actually think Stuart Skinner was one of the better players on the Edmonton Oilers. And why do I think that? 5 of the defensemen on Edmonton are paid more than Stuart Skinner. In fact, the backup goalie for the Vancouver Canucks is paid more than Stuart Skinner. Now, how much you're being paid shouldn't be the only factor on how well you perform, but it is a significant indicator when there are players making substantially more money than your goaltender, and they didn't show up for the game either. That has to be taken into consideration. I mean, in Florida, yeah, the party's still going, man. And did they ever have a, like a spectacular parade? Very much that the players interacted with the fans. most of the players on the Florida Panthers. Don't know so much about the backup goalie. The Florida Panthers today signed up some guy from Columbus, probably to save money. So that probably means the current backup goalie is on his way out. But the three other UFAs, Ekblad, Marchand, and Bennett, of course, they more than likely want to stay. And they probably all will, but if any of them's going to get moved along, I would think it would be Aaron Ekblad. You know, he was a significant player, been there a long time. But he could be on his way if any of those three guys are. I mean, last year, they got rid of Montour and were able to get a good defenseman in Seth Jones. A lot of people didn't think much of Seth Jones. He's a good defenseman. He simply was on lousy teams. He was on the Nashville Predators, a playoff team, but not really a Stanley Cup contender. In fact, the year after, when they did make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, they were not really a cup contender. They were in the final, but not really a contender. Not against Pittsburgh, anyway. But he also played on Columbus, and he played on Chicago, and had mixed results there. The problem is those teams sucked. It would be hard to be a good defenseman on any of those teams. So, he makes it to Florida, good team, does well. And he's not being paid chump change, he's being paid quite a bit. I think Chicago has to pay some of his salary, though. I think somehow it works that way. So will the Florida Panthers still be a competitive team next year? Absolutely. Yeah, they're going to be a tough team to play against, but nobody knows what's going to happen. But Mark Carney and the Edmonton Oilers lost, and I mean, I don't have any personal feelings against Connor McDavid or the rest of the Edmonton Oiler fans or Edmonton Oiler players, but I did want them to lose because I couldn't stand the idea that Mark Carney's team of winning. Then I have my personal reasons for that, as I've said before. But it was Mark Carney versus Donald Trump, and Donald Trump won. His team won. The United States won. No wonder the Canadians don't want to talk about it. And something behind the scenes made this happen. And, the Canucks have just picked up Evander Kane. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't want Evander Kane on the Vancouver Canucks. He may have wanted to be a Vancouver Canuck for a while or most of his life, but I don't care. I don't like his style of play. I don't find him humorous. He reminds me of a Ray Emery. He's just come off 2 Stanley Cup losses. I don't see a winning combination with this guy coming in. And he's expensive, and he's like a 20-goal guy. If he plays an entire season with the Canucks, he better score 30 goals. Because at over $5 million, no player's worth it if he can't score over 30. Well, depending on the position and what their job role is. Because ideally, Evander Kane would be a top 6 forward and contributing to the power play and this, that, and the other. And I just don't see it. And this might mean Brock Besser is going to be on the move. And to be honest with you, if it was choice between Brock Besser and Evander Kane, I'd much rather have Brock Besser. And you may go, well, that's because he's a white guy. And it's like, well, if you want me to be brutally honest with you, Evander Kane being black doesn't help. That's the truth. But aside from that, he has personal issues that make him undesirable to have on a team. I mean, there are other black players I would rather were on the Canucks than Evander Kane. I don't think he's going to bring us to the Stanley Cup or even to the finals. So this looks like Vancouver helping out Edmonton because Edmonton gets to dump a lot of cap space and perhaps pick up a player that they want. And the Canucks, he's too expensive for what he can contribute to the team. $5 million, forget about it. He's got to do better than 20 goals to get that. And maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. We don't know. But I don't want to wait a whole year to find out. Be rather disappointing. So, yeah, back to why the Edmonton Oilers took a dive. We don't know exactly. Something in the internal workings of the NHL and current politics. There's a lot of anti-American sentiment in the Canadian country right now. And, it would have been a huge propaganda victory for Mark Carney had they won. But they didn't, because that's not how the NHL works. And I'm glad it doesn't work that way. Because I don't think big influential people should be weighing in on sports games and manipulating the outcomes. I mean, Taylor Swift made an appearance for the Florida Panthers. Kind of just wanted to ignore that because I don't like her for supporting Kamala Harris. I dislike her for that. And her Chiefs, with her boyfriend, lost the Super Bowl. So I don't think her input is very much, but I don't know. Maybe it was this time around. Maybe they did have influence because, again, do they trust 20 players on the ice to do what they're supposed to do without meddling behind the scenes? I honestly don't believe it. And with what little they tell us about what goes on behind the scenes, and, we're not up to date on everything. Like, they don't give us advanced stats. They don't give us current injuries, especially in the playoffs. They're very vague about the explanations they make, and it's a continuous cycle. And the NHL cannot exist without the fan base buying tickets and buying merchandise. And Florida is going to spend a lot of money doing that, which is Edmonton. The fan base was already there. Yes, some jersey sales will come about it. Yes, it would be good for, some people's opinions of Canada anyway. You get a lot of old codgers going, oh, well, am I ever going to see a Canadian team win the Stanley Cup in my lifetime? And it's like, well, maybe you won't. You're not going to see it this year, that's for sure. And I don't feel much bad about it. I mean, get over it. Yeah, Mark Carney's team couldn't win. It's as simple as that. I wasn't going to cheer for Edmonton. Still glad that they lost, even if it was not as straightforward as some people think it was. So I'll leave it at that. You people have a good one, and I'll talk to you later.